The wind tore through the Caldor peaks like some wounded beast, sweeping sheets of white across the valley until everything blurred into a blinding frozen void, and Lieutenant Commander Cole Maddox pressed his body against a slab of ice-cold rock, feeling the chill gnaw through 3 layers of gear as if they weren't even there. Each breath he forced out came in ragged bursts that instantly froze in the sub-zero air. "Contact rear, 200 meters and closing!" Ethan Rourke shouted over the storm and the scattered gunfire, his voice barely cutting through the chaos. Bravo 2 had marched straight into a slaughterhouse. What should have been a simple document grab had become a full-on ambush. 52 trained, well-equipped hostiles hitting them like predators scenting blood. They rose out of the rocks around them like wolves, and the first blast arrived without the slightest warning. Logan Shaw, who'd been checking the perimeter, took the brunt of the RPG strike and flew 15 feet into a drift. His leg shattered so badly the bone pushed through the torn fabric. Tyler Knox dragged him behind the Humvee, catching shrapnel across his own back until both of them were sprawled in the snow, bleeding bright red against the white. "Maddox, we've got a problem," Caleb Mercer said as he crawled beside him, his helmet powdered with ice. "Radar's picking up sniper teams. 100 meters out, high ridge." Cole's stomach dropped. Hitting anything at that distance was hard even on a sunny day, with a Barrett and perfect visibility. But in a roaring blizzard with 10-foot visibility and 40-mile winds, it was suicide. "Countersnipe?" he asked, though he already knew the truth. Mercer shook his head. "Not a chance. I can barely see 50 meters. They've got thermals, probably Dragunovs. They'll wait till the wind settles and peel us apart." Another round sliced the air close enough to feel, the sharp whip-crack of a high-velocity round testing their positions. "How long for evac?" Owen Tate yelled from beside the wrecked Humvee. 40 minutes at best," Maddox answered. "No bird can fly through this." "We don't have 40 minutes, he shot back, while Reed Colson, hands slick with blood despite the cold, tried to keep Knox from slipping into shock. Cole did the math every commander hates. 6 men still able to fight, 2 hanging on by threads, 50-plus enemies with better elevation and long-range coverage, no air, no backup. The math simply didn't add up. He switched his radio to a frequency he'd only heard mentioned in a classified briefing years ago, one that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. A channel tied to a legend that supposedly died inside an ice fissure during Operation Frozen Dagger. Frost Protocol, this is Bravo 2 Actual, Grid, November 742 Echo. Over 50 hostiles, 2 critical casualties, pinned by sniper teams at 100 meters. Request immediate assistance. Only static answered him, just the wind and the distant crack of enemy fire. Mercer looked at him. "Sir, that frequency, I know what it's for." Cole cut him off, refusing to let doubt creep in as the storm fell even harder, like the mountain itself wanted to bury them. 30 seconds. A minute. Gunfire thickened as their attackers pushed forward under the cover of the blizzard. "Worth a try," Mercer muttered. "But she's been dead 3 years." Maddox kept the radio keyed anyway, clinging to the last thread of hope. Stories of the Frost Widow drifted through the special ops world like whispered myths. A woman sniper hitting impossible shots past 2,000 meters in Arctic whiteouts. A ghost who once held off a company by herself so a trapped ranger unit could escape. A soldier seen plunging into a glacier during extraction, her body never found. Unstoppable, they said, and gone. "Bravo 2 Actual, repeat your grid coordinates." The voice sliced through the static, smooth and cold as sharpened ice, unmistakably female. Maddox froze mid-movement. Mercer stared. Even Tate stopped firing long enough to whip his head around. Frost Protocol. Is that really you? Maddox forced himself to steady his voice, catching the slip before it fully escaped. Grid November 742 Echo. We've got critical casualties and long-range snipers pinning us down. No way to counterfire in this weather. The reply came cool and precise. Copy. What's your exact position in relation to the Humvee? Southeast side, using it as main cover, Cole said, glancing at the battered vehicle. Why? Don't move. Any of you. Stay exactly where you are. The transmission cut, leaving only static. Maddox stared at the radio. She's alive, Owen Tate whispered, stunned. The Frost Widow is actually alive. Cut the talk, Maddox snapped, though his heart was slamming in his chest. If the stories were true, even halfway true, they just might survive this. Reed Colson looked up from treating Tyler Knox, panic in his eyes. Sir, even if she's real, she'd be what? 10 miles out? 15? She'll never make it in time. Another explosion hammered the valley, closer this time. Mortars now. Through the swirling white, Maddox saw silhouettes advancing. Disciplined, patient operators moving with textbook precision. They weren't rushing. They knew the storm worked for them. Logan Shaw groaned, his skin gray from blood loss. Knox's breathing had gone fast and shallow, hypothermia clawing at him despite Reed's frantic efforts. Mercer Tate, prep to displace on my order, Maddox barked. We may have to sprint for that outcropping. Commander Maddox. The voice slid through his radio again. Confirm you and your team are using Humvee Echo 77 as cover. Affirmative. How did you... When was the last time you checked? Underneath it? Cole blinked. Underneath? We swept the perimeter when we took cover, but... No one checked there. Because you were under fire. Because you assumed the ground was clear. People always scan at eye level, not below. Tactical psychology. A different kind of chill crept through Maddox's spine. Are you saying... 90 seconds, Commander. Keep everyone still. And tell your man on the northwest corner to stop aiming at the Humvee's undercarriage. I'm not your enemy. Caleb Mercer, who had unknowingly lowered his aim toward the Humvee, froze and glanced at Maddox. Cole gave a slow nod. Mercer lifted his barrel skyward. Seconds dragged like hours as the storm screamed around them. Snow hammered the valley. The enemy crept closer, and somewhere beneath their boots, unbelievable as it sounded, the Frost Widow was already in position. 3 years earlier, under a sky just as merciless but in a different range of the Caldor Peaks, Mara Keene had learned what it meant to die and refuse. Born in Frosthaven Ridge, a town where winter swallowed 8 months and the other 4 merely prepared for the next freeze, she grew up under the hard lessons of her father Vernon, a hunting guide who could read wind the way others read maps, and her mother Lila, a former competitive shooter forced into retirement by a car accident. Mara learned early that survival wasn't brute force. It was patience, awareness, and never letting fear win. The Army noticed her talent fast. Sniper school barely challenged her, but Afghanistan's mountains and the Arctic's endless ice taught her truths no classroom could. During Operation Frozen Dagger, she earned her call sign. A Ranger battalion was trapped in a valley, boxed in on 3 sides. Air support was useless through the thick cloud cover, artillery too risky. They needed someone who could surgically eliminate the enemy commanders at extreme range. Mara was attached to a unit 15 miles away. She heard the distress call and didn't wait for permission. She grabbed her rifle, grabbed her spotter, young specialist Mason Drew, and vanished into the storm. The next 6 hours were wiped clean by classification, but the outcome wasn't. 27 Rangers evacuated alive, 43 confirmed kills at ranges between 1,800 and 2,400 meters in a blizzard at night. Mason died during the extract when an RPG blast sent him off a cliff. Mara had nearly caught him, clinging to a rope and reaching into the dark until his glove slipped from her grip and the scream cut off. She should have pulled back then. The mission was done. But grief burned hotter than logic. She hunted enemy stragglers for 2 more hours until she ran dry on ammo and they finally cornered her. Her last stand unfolded on a glacier, surrounded and outnumbered. She fought with her rifle until empty, then with her pistol, then her knife, then her bare hands. The ice fractured beneath her, and she plunged through, the cold swallowing her as she tumbled nearly 100 feet into a crevasse, slick as glass. She slammed into an outcropping 30 feet down, ribs cracking, blood filling her mouth, consciousness slipping away. When she woke, there was nothing but blackness and silence. Her NVGs were gone, her radio shattered, her beloved custom M110 missing, and it took her 2 days, 2 impossible days, to climb out of that frozen grave. 2 days she clawed her way upward with cracked ribs, a dislocated shoulder, and frostbite creeping through her fingers and toes, finding tiny holds in the ice and dragging herself inch by inch toward the faint promise of light, refusing to let the darkness swallow her. When she finally broke through the surface, half delirious from cold and pain, she spotted her rifle lying in a drift nearby, frozen stiff but still whole. The search teams were long gone. They'd spent 3 days looking, found torn gear and blood, and concluded she hadn't survived. Realistically, they were right. No one walked away from a fall like that. But Mara Keene had forced herself through the wilderness for a week before stumbling into an abandoned weather station, where she patched her wounds with whatever veterinary supplies the researchers had left behind and hunted for food until her strength flickered back. By the time she could return to civilization, she faced a choice: go back to a world that had already written her off, or stay dead and free. She chose the second. The name Mara Keene vanished from official records, and the Frost Widow became a ghost story whispered to new snipers for inspiration. The real woman built a hidden cabin deep in the Caldor Peaks, monitoring military frequencies, listening to the wind, knowing instinctively that the mountains weren't finished with her, that someone someday would need her again. That day arrived when she heard Cole Maddox's desperate transmission. She'd been 17 miles away, which in that weather might as well have been 100 for any normal operator. But Mara hadn't been normal since the day she climbed out of her own grave. She moved through the blizzard like she belonged to it, traveling in ways that would have killed anyone else, predicting where the SEAL team would take cover, and arriving 2 hours before they ever called for help. She'd already burrowed beneath their Humvee, waiting silently for the exact moment they'd need her most. "Incoming mortars!" Owen Tate shouted just before the first shell landed, blasting up a geyser of ice 20 meters out and rattling Maddox's teeth. A second strike boomed even closer, the enemy slowly walking their fire toward them. "We need to move!" Caleb Mercer yelled, trying to haul Logan Shaw to safety. "Negative!" Maddox snapped back. "She said don't move." "She's not here, sir. We're sitting ducks," Mercer insisted, right as a third mortar slammed into the other side of the Humvee hard enough for shrapnel to ping across the armor. Tate fired blindly into the storm, hitting nothing but snow. The enemy had clean coordinates, and Bravo 2 had only hope. Tyler Knox coughed blood, his lips turning blue. Reed Colson gave Maddox a look that said what neither wanted to say aloud. They had minutes, not hours. "Commander, we have to—" Mercer began, but he was cut off by a rifle blast so close it felt like it came from inside the earth beneath them, the unmistakable crack of a 300 Win Mag, or maybe a 338 Lapua, round built to kill at extreme distance. Maddox and Tate both dropped flat, expecting an attack from below, but instead they heard the scrape of someone shifting in packed snow. Then a muffled voice. "Mortar team at 1,800 meters, bearing 270. Down." Maddox's radio crackled again. "That's one. You have roughly 85 seconds before they reload. Use the time to not panic before I come out." "Come out from where?" Tate whispered. The answer appeared as a shape slid from beneath the Humvee's undercarriage. At first, Maddox thought his mind had finally snapped, that the storm had formed a human silhouette from blown snow. But then it stood. A woman. Average height, lean like someone who'd spent her life covering endless miles on foot, her face hidden by a white balaclava that revealed only gray eyes too calm for the chaos around them. Every scrap of clothing and gear, a full adaptive winter loadout, blended perfectly into the snow, as if she were carved from the storm itself. But it was the rifle that made Maddox's breath lock in his throat. A heavily customized M110 with a precision barrel, built-in suppressor, and optics so advanced they looked prototype level. The entire weapon coated in frost, as if it had lived in a freezer. "You're—" Tate started, but the words died on his tongue. "Busy," the woman, Mara Keene, said without looking up. Her tone clipped and unbothered as she moved with fluid precision, sliding from prone to a kneel and then into a rock-solid firing stance behind the Humvee's front quarter panel. "Lieutenant Commander Cole Maddox, I need casualty status. Now." Her words were exact, clean, unshaken by chaos. Not forced calm, real calm, the kind that didn't crack even in hell. "Logan Shaw, shattered femur, heavy blood loss. Tyler Knox, shrapnel to upper back and chest, possible punctured lung, slipping into hypothermic shock." Cole answered automatically, falling into the rhythm of someone who knew he was speaking to a higher authority. "Time's tight. Knox has maybe 10 minutes. Shaw lasts longer but needs surgery." Mara nodded once and made a microscopic adjustment to her scope. "Then we finish this in 8. There were 52 of them." Caleb Mercer spoke up. "Entrenched positions, snipers at 2,100 meters. "I heard," Mara replied. "There were 52. Now there are 51. She paused. "Mortar team was 2 men. One's dead. The other is deciding whether to keep firing or run. Give him a moment." As if cued, a distant panicked shout echoed through the storm, then silence. "He chose to run. Smart choice." Her eye stayed locked on her scope. "Primary threat is the Ridge Sniper Unit. 3 shooters, 1 spotter. They're skilled. Former military, Spetsnaz, Wagner, something in that family. They know their craft." Reed Coulson blinked. "How can you possibly track them in this weather?" For the first time, a hint of dry amusement touched Mara's voice. "I've been following them for 2 hours. I know which one smokes, which one fiddles with his scope because he doesn't trust his zero, and which one is about to die because he just shifted weight onto his left foot." She fired. The suppressor let out a sharp, swallowed cough. Somewhere far off, a short scream cut off mid-breath. "3 left," she said. "They're relocating. Won't help." She flowed into a new angle, her rifle shadowing invisible shapes beyond anyone else's sight. Her breathing slowed into a pattern. Inhale 4, hold 2, exhale 6, the rhythm of a machine built for killing. Maddox stared. You were under that Humvee. How? When? We had patrols. We swept the whole perimeter. You swept at eye level, Mara replied. I came in belly down during your sweep, while you were distracted by initial contact. Crawled the last 300 meters while your attention was outward. Basic principle. People see what they expect. No one expects the threat under their own cover. That's insane, Tate muttered. That's survival. Another tiny adjustment, another shot, another distant cry swallowed by the wind. 2. Mercer exchanged a look with Maddox. This was beyond anything they'd been trained to even imagine. Ma'am, Cole began carefully, are you really her? The Frost Widow? Mara didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice dropped softer. I was Mara Keene, Sergeant, U.S. Army 3rd Special Forces Group. That woman died in a crevasse 3 years ago. What's left is... She lined up another shot. Weather, wind, snow. The things that remain when everything else disappears. 2 shots snapped out so close together they blended. Sniper team eliminated. Now we deal with the infantry. The enemy clearly hadn't prepared for the loss of their overwatch. Maddox could feel confusion spreading across their comms, could sense the hesitation in their movement. Without their snipers, their entire plan cracked. Mara slid to the Humvee's rear, dropping into an odd but perfectly stable prone position. The storm howled around her, yet she sat inside it as if carved from its center. 50 meters northeast, she murmured. RPG-29 carrier, heavy weapons specialist. When I fire, he'll try to hit the Humvee. I need someone to put rounds near him, not on him, near enough to make him flinch. Tate nodded, repositioning. On my shot, Mara said. Silence stretched. Maddox couldn't see anything through the storm. She might have been aiming at ghosts. Then she fired. Tate lit up the area she'd marked. Through the whiteout, somewhere impossibly distant, came a wet, hammer-like thud, followed by a scream, followed by the unmistakable whoosh of an RPG fired wildly. The grenade arced off, detonating uselessly against a cliff 200 meters wide. RPG team neutralized, Mara reported. Their commander is reorganizing. Northern approach, large boulder roughly 400 meters out. He's got a radio, and he's calling in reinforcements. Can you take him? Maddox asked. Mara didn't blink. Not from this angle. That boulder gives him full cover, but everyone has to step out eventually. She nudged her scope a fraction of an inch. Until then, we thin the herd. What followed made the hair on Cole's neck rise. Mara somehow picked out targets in a storm that turned the world into white noise. She factored wind, snow density, air pressure, temperature, even minute drift, all in seconds. Then she fired, and men simply dropped. She didn't miss, not once. Every round hit exactly where she intended, every hit lethal or crippling. She moved through the enemy formation like an invisible blade cutting through cloth, quiet, precise, unstoppable. 12, she murmured. 13, 14. The enemy finally sensed the wrongness. Their advance stuttered. They dove for cover, desperate to find the ghost killing them. But Mara's suppressed rifle left no telltale flash and no signature in the snow. They're breaking, Mercer whispered, almost reverent. Not yet, Mara said, her voice flat. Their commander's still alive. He'll try to rally them. Cut off the head, the body dies. She waited, still as carved stone, until a shift in wind changed the flow of snow. Somewhere out there, a man made one tiny mistake. There, Mara said, and fired. This time, Maddox heard the cry clearly, followed by frantic shouting in Russian, orders turning to panic. Commander down, they're scattering. 30 seconds, she said calmly. Then your team preps to move. We're relocating Shaw and Knox into the Humvee. Can it still roll? Mercer checked quickly. Engine's good. Front axle's damaged. We can move, just not fast. Fast enough, Mara replied. We only need to make it 200 meters north. There's an outcropping with a small cave system, natural cover, defensible. We hold there until extraction. Maddox stared. You planned this? I planned 12 different outcomes, she answered, already helping Coulson lift Knox into the rear compartment. This one was option 7. Not ideal, but survivable. She handled Knox with surprising gentleness, checking his wounds with a softness that didn't match the frost-cold precision of her shooting. Tate, Mercer, cover us! Maddox, drive! I'll handle rear security! She swung her rifle into place. On my mark, we move, fast and smooth. They're shaken, not gone. Some will regroup. Cole slid into the driver's seat. The engine coughed twice before catching. The Humvee lurched forward, protesting every bump through its damaged suspension. They made barely 50 meters before gunfire cracked behind them, stragglers desperate to salvage something from the disaster. Mara's rifle answered instantly. Cole couldn't see her through the swirling snow, but every measured cough of her suppressor marked another enemy dropping. They reached the outcropping exactly where she'd said. A cave, more a deep recess, waited in the rock face, sheltering them from overhead fire and limiting flanking angles. Inside, Mara ordered. Tate and Mercer hauled Shaw and Knox in while Coulson grabbed the medical kit. Maddox killed the engine. Go. Mara lingered outside, rigid as a statue carved of ice, scanning the storm with tiny controlled arcs of her rifle. Only once she was sure did she step backward into the cave, never turning her back to the blizzard. We hold here. Extraction in 35 minutes. They won't try again. They've lost too many, and they don't know how many more like me might be out there. She finally lowered her rifle and peeled off her balaclava. Her face was all harsh lines and hardened angles, shaped by too many winters and too little rest. A scar traced down her jaw and disappeared into her collar. Her hair, cropped short, had more gray than its original brown, though she couldn't be older than mid-30s. But it was her eyes, those cold gray eyes, that pinned Maddox. Eyes that had seen too much, survived too much, and refused to break. Thank you, Cole said quietly. Mara gave one small nod. Just doing what I do. I thought you were dead. I was, she shrugged. Then I decided not to be. She knelt beside Knox, checking his vitals with quick, practiced motions. He'll make it. Barely. Your medic did good work. Coulson blinked at the praise, stunned. Shaw, pale and trembling, stared at Mara like she was an apparition. I heard the stories, he rasped. Didn't believe them. Smart, Mara said quietly. Don't believe stories. Believe what you can see and touch. Everything else is noise. The minutes crawled by in a thick electric silence. Reed Coulson kept working on Knox and Shaw, doing everything humanly possible for field conditions. Tate and Mercer guarded the cave entrance, even though visibility had collapsed into a wall of white, the storm somehow growing even angrier. Mara sat cross-legged near the opening, rifle laid across her lap, eyes closed. She looked like she was meditating, but Maddox could see the subtle tension in her posture, the tiny tilt of her head as she tracked sounds hidden under the howl of wind. Contact, she murmured suddenly, still not opening her eyes. 800 meters, southwest, 6 hostiles trying to flank. How in the hell can you... Mercer began, but Mara cut him off softly. Listen, not with your ears, your whole body. Feel the air shift when something moves through it. Hear the difference between snow falling on its own and snow kicked up by footsteps. The storm isn't your enemy. It's a map. It tells you everything if you know how to read it. Her eyes snapped open, and she lifted her rifle in a single fluid motion. They're close enough now. This is going to get loud. No one even finished asking what she meant before the cave mouth exploded with gunfire. The 6 flankers had gotten dangerously close and lit up the entrance with automatic weapons. Mara rolled left, came up kneeling, and fired back. Without the suppressor, the rifle cracked like thunder in the confined cave, each shot punching the air like a hammer. The attackers thought they were surprising Bravo team. They'd actually walked straight into a choke point. Tate and Mercer added their M4s to the fight, muzzle flashes strobing across the stone walls, spent shells clattering everywhere. Maddox spotted a hostile trying to push closer under covering fire. Mara tracked him with inhuman accuracy, giving just enough lead for wind and movement. She fired. He collapsed. "RPG!" Mercer shouted. One of the hostiles had shouldered a launcher, lining up a shot that would seal the cave and bury all of them alive. Mara saw it, ran the math instantly, and did something completely insane. She stood up, full height. No cover. She fired 3 times in a perfect rhythm. The first round hit the RPG wielder's shoulder. The second struck the launcher. The third hit the rocket the instant it left the tube. The warhead exploded mid-air, far too close to its owner, detonating in a bloom of fire that tore apart the gunner and 2 of his comrades, turning the storm briefly orange before the snow swallowed it up again. Mara dropped back behind the wall like she'd simply finished a routine drill. "Did you just—" Tate couldn't even form the sentence. "Shoot a rocket out of the air?" Mara checked her chamber and slammed in a fresh magazine. "Technically, I hit the launcher, and the rocket intersected the round. Not the same." "That's impossible," Mercer muttered. "Apparently not," Mara replied, a cold edge to her tone. "Impossible just means someone hasn't practiced enough. Took me 4 years and 17,000 rounds to make that shot reliable. That's not magic. That's math and muscle memory." The remaining 3 hostiles broke and retreated, dragging their wounded. Maddox opened his mouth to ask why she didn't finish them, but Mara answered before he could. 3 terrified men running back to their unit do more damage than 3 bodies in the snow. Fear spreads faster than bullets. Use it. She slid back into her watch position. "They won't return. We broke them." She was right. The next 20 minutes passed without so much as a shadow. The storm began to ease slightly, visibility shifting from hopeless to merely awful. Knox's breathing had steadied. Shaw was unconscious but stable. Coulson looked drained but relieved. "Extraction incoming," Maddox said into the cave. 2 minutes out. They've got eyes on us." Then my part's finished. Mara rose and packed her gear, every movement deliberate. "Wait," Maddox said. "Come with us. You saved our lives. The least we can do is—" "What? Pin a medal on me?" Her voice was flat. "Drag me into a debriefing room? Write reports about a dead woman walking? I made my choice, Commander. I stayed gone." "You could save more people," he insisted. "How many teams out there right now need someone like—" He struggled for the right phrase. "Like a guardian angel?" Mara's smile was brittle and sad. "I'm no angel. Angels are innocent." She stepped to the mouth of the cave and looked out into the storm that had become her home. "I'm not light. I'm not mercy." She pulled her hood back up, her silhouette dissolving into the blowing snow. "I'm the cold. I'm the wind. I'm what happens when you refuse to stop even after you should have died." Mara said quietly. And that kind of thing doesn't belong in your world anymore. The distant thump of rotor blades began carving through the storm, the extraction bird closing in fast. At least tell us how to reach you, Mercer called after her. If we ever need— You won't need me, Mara cut in. You're SEALs. You're the best there is. Today was just bad timing and worse weather. She slung her rifle over her shoulder. But if you ever find yourself trapped in a storm with enemies closing in and no way out, look down. Look beneath you. Look where no one sane or alive should be. Her balaclava came up again, erasing her face into a blank white shape. The helicopter dipped into view, descending through swirling snow. "Frost Widow," Maddox shouted. "Will we see you again?" Mara paused at the cave mouth, a white silhouette against white wind. "If you're very lucky, Commander." She shook her head. "No, because if you ever see me again, it means you're in the kind of trouble that requires the impossible." And then she stepped into the storm and vanished, literally vanished, swallowed by the blizzard as if she were nothing but frost and imagination. The helicopter touched down moments later. Medics rushed in, loading Shaw and Knox onto stretchers. The pilot barked questions about hostiles and danger zones, but Maddox barely heard anything. He stood at the cave's edge, staring into the white void where her tracks disappeared, visible for 20 feet, then blending seamlessly into the wilderness. "Sir," Tate said softly, touching his shoulder. "We need to move." "Yeah," Maddox exhaled. "Let's go home." But as the helicopter lifted off, banking toward safety, he kept watching the mountains. Somewhere out there in the frozen wilderness, a ghost was walking. A legend who shouldn't exist, and the storm itself seemed alive around her. The debriefing lasted 6 hours. Maddox and his team sat in a sterile conference room at Forward Operating Base Frostwall, recounting their story again and again to intelligence officers who looked increasingly strained. "Let me be perfectly clear," Colonel Barbara Hensley said, voice steady but eyes sharp. "You're telling me a soldier declared KIA 3 years ago appeared under your vehicle, neutralized roughly 47 enemy combatants in under 15 minutes, and then disappeared into a blizzard?" "Yes, ma'am," Maddox replied evenly. "That's exactly what happened." "And you recovered no physical evidence of her presence? No casings, equipment, DNA, nothing?" "She was thorough, ma'am," Mercer said. "She policed her brass, left zero trace." "We have photos," Tate added, holding up his phone. The images were blurry, barely visible through snow. Just a white figure with a rifle, face completely hidden. Hensley didn't flinch. "This could be anyone. It could be one of your own operators." "With respect, ma'am," Sullivan said firmly. "We know what we saw, and we know who saved us." The intelligence officer beside Hensley, Captain Marvin Reddick, leaned forward. "The issue, gentlemen, is that what you're describing violates tactical reality. The ranges you've cited in those conditions, in that time frame, it's beyond human performance. Far beyond." Maddox's jaw tightened. "We've got the bodies to prove it." "Bodies with bullet wounds," Reddick replied calmly, "which could have come from confusion on the enemy's side. Friendly fire, panic, visibility was near zero. You've provided no concrete proof that this Frost Widow exists." Maddox felt heat rising in his chest. "Are you accusing us of fabricating our own rescue?" "I'm saying," Reddick answered carefully, "that you were under extreme stress. You were outnumbered, pinned down, 2 men dying. The human mind is capable of constructing powerful narratives under that kind of pressure." Perhaps you had help from an unidentified friendly unit you never saw. Perhaps you misinterpreted events in the blizzard. Or... He paused, closing the file. Perhaps something else happened. Something we can't verify. Maybe the enemy fell apart for reasons you didn't see. Maybe... Reddick began, but Mercer cut him off, voice sharp. Maybe you weren't there. Maybe you didn't watch what we watched. Colonel Hensley lifted a hand, stopping the argument cold. Gentlemen, no one doubts your bravery, but we can't submit official reports built on ghost stories. We need concrete facts. The fact is, our men are alive, Coulson said, refusing to back down. The fact is, we walked into an ambush that should have wiped us out, and we walked out breathing. The fact is, someone helped us, someone with skills beyond anything we've ever seen. He met her gaze. Whether you want to believe that someone was Marroquin or not, those facts stand. Silence flooded the room. At last, Hensley exhaled and said, "Off the record? I pray you're right. I hope there is someone out there watching over our people. But on the record, your survival will be attributed to superior tactics, shifting weather, and enemy miscoordination. Anything beyond that is speculation." "What about the Frost protocol frequency?" Maddox asked. "That's classified. That's real." Brennan and Hensley exchanged a glance. "That frequency was retired after Sergeant Keene was declared KIA, Hensley said. "If someone answered, we'll investigate. But my preliminary read is that you were experiencing radio interference under extreme stress, your minds filled in gaps with familiar voices." "With respect, ma'am," Mercer said bluntly, "that's bullshit. We know what we heard. We know what we lived." "Noted," Hensley replied coolly. "But unless you produce this woman or verifiable evidence, the official report won't change. You're dismissed." They filed out of the briefing in a silence heavier than snowfall. The sun dipped behind the mountains, turning the ice fields red and gold, colors too warm for a place so cold. "They think we're crazy," Sullivan muttered. "No," Mercer corrected. "They think we're traumatized. Worse." Maddox stopped walking and turned to his team. Shaw and Knox were already en route to Germany. The rest of them, alive only because of her, waited for their commander to speak. "Do you believe it?" Maddox asked quietly. "Do you believe she was real?" Coulson nodded slowly. "I felt her checking my wounds. I saw her shoot a rocket out of the air. I watched 47 men drop because she decided they would." His voice trembled. "Real doesn't cut it." Mercer looked out toward the distant peaks. "They aren't going to acknowledge her. They'll bury this under classifications until no one even whispers about it." Maddox thought of Mara standing in the storm, eyes like winter steel, moving with a sense that didn't belong to any human he'd ever met. "We don't do anything," he said at last. "She's right. She doesn't belong here. Not in our system. Not in our reports." He gestured toward the jagged horizon. "She belongs out there. And maybe the world needs someone who lives outside the rules, outside the bureaucracy, outside everything we think is possible." "So we just forget her?" Sullivan asked. "No," Maddox said. "We remember. We pass the story on. And when someone out there calls that frequency, scared, cornered, out of time, maybe she'll answer again." He started walking. "That's her choice. All we can do is honor it." That night, unable to sleep, Maddox drifted into the communications center. The specialist on duty straightened up. "Commander, something you need?" "I want you to monitor a frequency," Maddox said. "Don't ask questions. Just listen. If anything comes through, anything at all, you contact me immediately." He wrote down the Frost protocol frequency, The specialist frowned. Sir, this frequency's retired. I know, Maddox said quietly. Monitor it anyway. The specialist saw something in Maddox's eyes and nodded. Yes, sir. I'll keep an ear on it. 3 days later, new orders arrived. Bravo 2 was rotating back to Conus for decompression. The mountain incident was declared closed, stamped classified, and sealed away. On their last night at FOB Frostwall, Maddox stood outside in the freezing dark, staring up at the stars. The mountains loomed as black silhouettes against the snow. I know you're out there, he said softly to the wind. I know you're real, and I know someday someone else is going to need you. The wind answered in its own ancient language, or maybe it was just the wind. Either way, Cole Maddox went home with a story he could never tell, a debt he could never repay, and the knowledge that somewhere in the frozen wilds, death walked on 2 legs and answered when the desperate whispered her name. 6 months after the incident, a file quietly appeared deep inside JSOC's buried archives. No proper designation, no classification stamps, just a plain label. Frost Widow, existence unconfirmed. Inside were Bravo 2's testimonies, photographs that proved nothing yet hinted at everything. Analysis of enemy casualties with shot angles that shouldn't have been possible in a storm like that. And weather data confirming visibility had been near zero. At the bottom, Colonel Hensley had added a handwritten note. Recommend passive monitoring of associated frequencies. Do not initiate active tracking. If subject is real, interference may destroy a unique strategic asset. If subject is not real, further investigation wastes resources. Suggested protocol: watchful waiting. In other words, if she exists, leave her alone. She's too valuable to disturb. The file gathered digital dust, but certain eyes found it, and the story drifted across the special operations world the only way such stories ever do. Not officially, never officially, but quietly between operators who understood that the world was stranger than their briefings admitted. A SEAL team in the Hindu Kush reported seeing a white silhouette on a ridge before their pursuers fell to unseen shots from an impossible angle. A ranger squad in the Arctic, separated from their main force, followed a trail of small footprints that led them to safety, only for the tracks to end abruptly, at a cliff no human could have climbed. A Delta operator in the Himalayas heard a woman on his radio warn him of an ambush. His comm logs showed nothing. Reports were filed, acknowledged, and deliberately ignored. That was the rule now. If you see the ghost, say thank you, and let her go. Cole Maddox never forgot. He kept the Frost protocol frequency saved on every radio he carried. He never transmitted on it again, but he always kept it close, a lifeline to something beyond doctrine. 2 years later, on a freezing December night during another mountain operation, snow thick around him and that familiar weight of responsibility pressing down, his radio crackled. At first it was only static, then a voice, quiet, unmistakable. Storm's coming, Commander. Bad one. Shift your route 30 degrees north. Trust me. Maddox didn't hesitate. North 30, move out. His team shot him confused looks but followed without argument. 30 minutes later, the avalanche roared down the mountain behind them, swallowing the path they would have taken. Thanks, Maddox whispered into the mic. No reply, only wind. But far away, through the swirling snow, he thought he saw a white figure on a ridge. There one heartbeat, gone the next. In her hidden cabin deep in the Caldor Peaks, Mara Keene cleaned her rifle by the glow of an oil lamp. The weapon gleamed, every component maintained with reverence, every mechanism smooth and silent. Her radio sat beside her, always powered, always listening. She monitored 17 military channels now, covering operations across 3 continents. Mostly she listened, learning patterns, understanding conflicts before they unfolded. But sometimes she heard a voice that carried fear or desperation, a situation that demanded the impossible. And when she did, she packed her gear and stepped into the night, becoming whatever the world needed her to be. Not a soldier, not anymore. Something colder. Something that lived in the space between life and death, between logic and impossibility, between the storm and the hush that followed it. She was the Frost Widow, the legend that refused to die, the ghost who saved those she could. As long as storms fell and soldiers fought, she would be there somewhere in the white wilderness, unseen but present, watching and waiting. Because some debts never faded, some wounds never healed, and some people were simply forged to exist in places where normal rules no longer applied. Mara checked her ammunition, verified each piece of gear, and prepared for the next call. It would come. It always came. And she would be ready. Outside, the snow began to fall again, and in that endless white, if you knew how to look, you might catch footprints that led nowhere, a shadow under a vehicle, a lone figure on a distant ridge, or nothing at all. But whether seen or unseen, felt or imagined, the Frost Widow was out there. And that was enough.